The start of NBA free agency is just 2 days away, and some serious questions are still unanswered for the Toronto Raptors. And all these questions stem from a mistake that was made during the season. So, how do the Raptors really plan on fixing it? Let's get into it. Welcome back everybody to Amateur Hour Sports. This is the YouTube channel dedicated to Toronto Raptors coverage and videos just like this. If you want to see more content just like it, especially as we get into the free agent season in the NBA offseason, then please make sure you are subscribed to the channel. You can help me on my road to 15,000 subscribers and hit that notification bell as well so you never miss out on any of the uploads. But as we get closer and closer to the June 30th start of the NBA free agent season, there are still some major questions that the Toronto Raptors have about their future that remain unanswered. And the biggest question that Raptors fans have going into this offseason was, what was the direction of this team going to be for the next season? Where are we going to go? This team can go in multiple directions. They can try to make this team better, try to get in contention for an NBA championship. They saw last season the Miami Heat, an 8 seed, got all the way to the NBA Finals. There has never been more parity in the league, so why not make your team as competitive as possible? Now, they could also go in the other direction, decide that this team isn't really going anywhere. Let's try to sell off these assets while we can before we have to give them their big contracts, bring in some youth, bring in some picks, and bring in stuff that you can develop with and build for a better future. But there's also a third option the Raptors could consider, and that's just keeping the status quo and keeping this team relatively the same. The Raptors last season finished 41-41. Now, that's not embarrassing in any sense, a 41-41 season. There's a lot of teams around the NBA that would take a 500 season, but the expectations going into the season were much greater for this Raptors team. So the team really fell short, and there could be an expectation and the thought process from the management for people like Masai Ujiri that this team underwhelmed and finished 41-41. What happens if they really were able to reach their potential? How many wins could that team get? And how competitive could they be in the playoffs? A lot of these questions and a lot of the rage about these questions about the direction and the impatience in wanting this team to pick a direction stem from a mistake that really occurred at the 2023 NBA trade deadline. Now, looking back on the Jakob Poeltl trade, as far as the valuation for the player was concerned, it seemed like a lightly protected pick along with some salary filler. That really did make sense, along with the second round pick, of course, but it really felt like the valuation for Jakob Poeltl made sense. Jakob Poeltl's a great player, produced some excellent numbers with the Raptors, and since he came into the team was above 500. They were 15-10 in games that Jakob Poeltl was a part of the organization. But the trade necessarily and the valuation wasn't the mistake. The mistake that occurred was putting faith in this team to turn it around after the trade deadline and really make themselves a competitive team. That didn't happen. That didn't materialize. As a result, the Raptors finished on the outside of the playoff picture looking in, and also sacrificed getting a really good position in the NBA draft lottery and thus ended up with the 13th overall pick. Now, with that 13th overall pick, I think Raptors fans as of now are extremely happy with the decision to select Grady Dick, a shooter that this team desperately needed. It really fills in a big gap for this organization, but we do look at what could have been for this team, looking at this extremely deep draft class. So the mistake was the direction. And I think that we're going into an offseason right now where Raptors fans don't have a ton of optimism into what the future could be for this team. We don't really feel as though this team is ready to be competitive. We don't feel as though this team is ready to contend with the realistic outcomes for this offseason. If the Raptors were to bring back Jakob Poeltl and Fred VanVleet and run back with a relatively similar team, but maybe adding in a little bit more depth. Maybe they can pick up somebody in the free agent season. Maybe they can still keep Otto Porter Jr. and he can stay mostly healthy. And Grady Dick is coming to the team once again, addressing a major concern for the organization and for the roster by adding in shooting and adding in movement shooting while not sacrificing the size, because Grady Dick does possess great size for his abilities. But just how far could that team go? That would be the big question. So fans are thinking potentially this team could move in the opposite direction. This team should move towards getting draft picks, mortgaging for the future. But there's major problems with going with that direction. If you ask me, I think that ultimately you have to admit to your mistake. Maybe you shouldn't have gone in at the trade deadline. Maybe you should have kept that 2024 first round pick and focused on getting developmental pieces and building a little bit more around Scottie Barnes for the future. But As a result of making that trade, now you're stuck with Jakob Poeltl as an unrestricted free agent. You didn't move Fred VanVleet at the trade deadline and kept him, so now he's an unrestricted free agent, and you lost a 2024 first-round pick again. You lost that pick in the process, so tanking does you no favors this season as far as your draft pick is concerned. It would be a disaster situation to let Jakob Poeltl walk for free after trading away so much to get him at the trade deadline. It'd be a disaster situation, but if the team wanted to commit and going in a different direction, focusing on development, well, Jakob Poeltl's getting older and he's ready to compete somewhere. He spent all his time with the San Antonio Spurs. He's ready to start winning some games. And if he wants to do that and the Raptors don't want to do that, then that could be the end of a very brief second tenure in Toronto for Jakob Poeltl. So a major decision needs to be made because, well, you can't really go in a different direction because all of a sudden you look really bad. You traded all that stuff away for Jakob Poeltl, then he ends up leaving for free. You kept Fred VanVleet, and maybe he wants to go to a more competitive organization. All of a sudden, he leaves for free as well. So the front office really handcuffed themselves in the decision that, yes, this team pretty much just needs to run it back for the next season with slight tinkers to the roster, slight tinkers to the depth, and hopefully a new head coach that can get a lot more out of this team. So what is the likely course of action for the Raptors? All signs at this point towards this team running it back. And if the team is ready to run it back and try to be as competitive as possible for next season, hey, there's no first-round pick to worry about, so why not go out and win games? I feel strongly and maintain my belief that Jakob Poeltl is going to remain in this organization beyond the offseason and into next season. Jakob Poeltl's valuation, personally, I'd value him at roughly $18 million. It looks like just because all of these extra things involved with it, all of these, hey, either you sign him or you look really bad with that trade, that's going to get him up to around $20 million. And I think that's a proper valuation. Is 4 years, $80 million, $20 million a year. That makes a considerable degree of sense for Jakob Poeltl. And as a salary cap goes up with a new TV deal kicking in and the CBA that we spoke about many times, that contract's going to look a little bit better down the line. That's not the complication with this situation, though. The complication, the further complication, I mean, there could be complication with Poeltl. We're under the assumption here that, yes, he is going to stay with the team. Obviously, it's up to Poeltl himself where he wants to go, but it seems like he wants to remain here. It seems that the Raptors want to make that happen. The bigger complication, if you will, comes from the point guard position with Fred VanVleet. I've outlined a variety of reasons for months and months now as to why Fred VanVleet is likely to receive $30 million. First of all, the Raptors have his bird rights. Second of all, the Raptors don't have a viable way to replace him in the point guard position. Third of all, there's going to be a lot of teams interested in him, which is going to drive up his market value. The consensus around the league right now is that Fred VanVleet is going to go and that so many teams are interested. So naturally, that is going to boost his value. And the fact of the matter is he's still a good basketball player. So $30 million a year seems like the valuation for Fred VanVleet. It's starting to look more like a 3-year, $90 million contract rather than a 4-year, $120 million contract, which gives me a little bit more ease. You're not committing as much time to Fred VanVleet. Like, you can live with that contract. That's certainly a contract that you'd be able to potentially trade down the line if that is what you see fit to do with the player. But for the season and for not losing him for free, $30 million is probably about where I would go for Fred VanVleet. The problem is the cap space for this team. Gary Trent Jr. re-signed on, or just took his player option. It's on $18.5 million. That was a pretty big win for the Raptors, but it does limit the amount of space they now have to bring back Poeltl and VanVleet. Poeltl seems like, again, he's going to come back, but if you want to give $50 million between them total, you slightly have to go over the tax with the current way the roster is constructed. So now, all of a sudden, there's these maneuvers you have to make. Do you waive Otto Porter Jr.? Can you trade Chris Boucher? Personally, I'd really like to get out that Chris Boucher contract. But all of these complications arise, and the team suffers a little bit as a result. So it's mostly going to be the same team coming back for next season, but we're expecting to see better results. I do expect to see better results, but not results that are better enough to warrant likely running this team back. But without that first-round pick, many of you are saying, well, to make it simple, let Fred VanVleet walk. Let him go for free, get all the cap space. It wouldn't be that much cap space, by the way, because the Raps are operating so close to the tax already. But let Fred VanVleet walk for free. Find ways to replace him in the point guard position. You know, in the free agent pool, slim pickings, like is there Javon Carter, Dante DiVincenzo? Are those guys going to start in the point guard position? doesn't give me a ton of confidence with them starting. Do you move Malachi Flynn there? No. Scotty Barnes, you slide him into the point guard position. That's probably the best way to do it, but I still feel as though Scotty Barnes' best spot is in the forward positions. But if Fred VanVleet walks, this team is still going to want to be competitive. And even though you have more cap space available, there's not much, and ultimately, your team suffers. Fred VanVleet leaving would make this team worse. Replacing him, trying to replace him, the team would be worse than it was with Fred VanVleet on this team. So, the mistake was to commit to this team, but I think we're stuck in this mode right now where we do have to stick with this core for at least one more season to see where we're going to end up. It does feel as though that's the direction the front office has chosen. It would really be surprised to me if it went in any other way. So, if the team wants to compete, wants to have a successful season, the only option really is to bring back Poeltl and bring back Fred VanVleet if they want to stay with the team, they want to stay in Toronto. The disaster situations, if both the players leave, then we really have to reset and we really have some work to do. And I think at that point, we'd be forced into the other direction of trading guys like Pascal Siakam and getting the plethora of picks or the plethora of young players. But ultimately, the Raptors have to answer for the mistakes that they made here. They made mistakes at the trade deadline. They made mistakes in committing to this team. But we're really not in a position where we can just wipe our hands clean and just admit to our mistakes. We kind of are forced into this situation right now to double down, and that's likely going to be Jakob Poeltl getting $20 million, Fred VanVleet getting $30 million a year, and moving on from another player to make room for them and running it back with mostly the same team. I believe they can be better than 41-41. I believe they can be quite a bit better, but I don't really have belief they can be better enough to really challenge in the playoff picture. So, we're heading into an offseason where hopes are a bit bleak, but I think as we get more and more into the offseason, fans will regain that optimism on the team. It's just not an ideal situation for the Raptors. The front office made it not ideal, and it looks like we're going to continue in that vein. You want my thoughts? Probably should have traded Siakam for that 3rd overall pick. Maybe a trade was never going to materialize, but I felt like that direction would have been a little bit safer for this team. We'll see how it all plays out in the next couple of days. What do you think is the best direction for this team at the start of NBA free agency? Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below, because that is it for me for today. Thanks so much for watching this video. Guys, if you did enjoy, please make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Amateur Hour Sports for more content just like this. I'll see you again very soon for another video.